Genius Club.
What the hell are you looking at? Did you see my bike? Get out already now!
What the hell are you looking at, huh?
Easy, everybody. Is there really a problem here? It's completely over now. We'll have to continue this conversation later.
Sure, so what happens next? Are you going to message me, or do you want me to wait here?
This guy's got stripes.
The story follows Ryan, an American who used to work as a police officer. Filled with rage, he heads out in search of some criminals who were convicted of the worst crimes seen by society. But for some strange reason that is still unknown, they were released despite all the accusations against them. Now we meet James, one of our protagonist's targets. The criminal is hunting animals with his group of friends in the forest. Desperate because he cannot kill any animal, he decides to separate from the group and begins running like a madman until he reaches a hill, where he is intercepted by Ryan, who begins confronting him about a woman named Mary Anna, and when the criminal denies everything, our protagonist ends up killing him in a brutal way. After returning to his apartment, Ryan wakes up disturbed by a nightmare. With his sleep interrupted, he decides to get up and clean his weapons. The next morning, he heads to a cafe to have breakfast and then continues his journey toward a town nicknamed Hope. He stops at a gas station and the attendant, seeing his tough appearance, places his hand on his shotgun. Ryan pulls out $20 to ask for gasoline. He asks about a hotel, and the man informs him that a few blocks away he will find a motel where his co-worker Darcy will attend him. She is a fun girl. On the other hand, inside one of the FBI offices, we meet Frank, an agent specialized in tracking and capturing criminals accused of homicide and sexual crimes. Among the most recent cases he is investigating is that of James, a convict responsible for the death of 2 girls. His first victim was named Karen. She was 14 years old, and it took the authorities an entire week to identify her body. His second victim was an 11-year-old girl named Anna. James is a very dangerous man, and they must keep him under surveillance 24 hours a day. At that moment, one of his co-workers interrupts the meeting to inform them that James's body has been found. Without wasting time, they head to the coroner to confirm the suspect. The coroner informs them that the body is completely destroyed. His trachea, ribs, head, and even his legs were broken. His cause of death was a fall from a great height. But the strange part is that he had been strangled before the fall. Whoever caused his death is, without a doubt, a very strong man. After hearing this, the agents connect the death to a man they nickname the Vigilante. Apparently, Ryan is already known by that nickname inside the federal agencies. Returning to our protagonist, he arrives at the motel and speaks with Darcy. She explains the rules to avoid problems. Apparently, some clients have rented rooms with the intention of stealing the motel's belongings. A few minutes later, we see a biker gang member insulting a stray dog. Just when he pulls out his gun to shoot it, Ryan appears and disarms him with a punch. The biker tries to defend himself, but Ryan humiliates him again. He pretends to hand back the gun, and the biker grabs it to try to shoot him in the head. However, the former cop had already removed the magazine. With 3 simple moves, he brings him to the ground and reloads the weapon. After sparing his life, the rest of the gang appears and asks if he has a problem with their boy. Drake, who leads the gang together with his brother Rex, tries to intimidate him. Despite being outnumbered, Ryan holds his ground without showing fear, something that ends up surprising Drake. And because one of his associates appears at the place, they decide to leave, while saying that later they will continue their conversation. The gang is known for dealing in weapons trafficking. Right in the middle of the street, they close a deal involving long guns and promise to take revenge for their soldier nicknamed the Prospect, who has just been initiated into the organization. When returning to the motel, Ryan finds Darcy looking at his 1968 vehicle. She tells him that her husband used to be a fan of classic cars. He always got excited when he saw one on the streets. Changing the subject, she asks if he is a cop or a bounty hunter, and Ryan lies by saying that he is simply on vacation. Darcy points out that his appearance says the complete opposite. Meanwhile, we see the gang leader training with his punching bag. At that moment, his brother appears and informs him that they have just found one of the gang's biggest debtors, and since he has no money to pay them, Drake challenges him to a fight inside an electrified cage. If he manages to survive one round, his debt will be forgiven. The fight begins, and the debtor tries to surprise him. But his punches are not strong enough to knock him out. With total superiority, the biker begins beating him and ends up humiliating him brutally. After knocking him out, his brother approaches and asks if he plans to kill him, and he responds that it is not necessary because when he felt cornered, he tried to defend himself, and for that reason his debt will be forgiven. By order of his brother, Rex heads to the methamphetamine laboratory to check the distribution of the equipment. However, when he arrives at the location, we see that the vigilante is stalking him from a distance. Once inside the facility, the prospect comments that he investigated the man who attacked him at the club. He discovered that he is staying at Darcy's motel. Rex replies that they will go visit him later. For now, they must focus on packaging the merchandise, and afterward, he will inform his brother that everything is ready for delivery. When night falls, Rex arrives at the motel to ask Darcy about the new client. She tells him that she does not know his name. Rex tries to take the records from the counter, but Darcy stops him and warns that he cannot do that. In response, Rex hits her hard. Then he approaches the desk and notices a shotgun stored on the shelves. He grabs it while Darcy accuses him of murdering a girl simply because she rejected him. After hearing the accusation, the biker becomes furious and points the same shotgun at her. Arrogantly, he claims that there is no woman capable of resisting his beauty, that sooner or later they all end up accepting him. Then he lets her go and begins checking the records. When he finds the stranger's name, he comments that the gang has unfinished business with that client. At that moment, Ryan appears from behind and surprises him, smashing his head against the wall until he loses consciousness. Darcy warns him that he is the brother of the biker gang's leader and that he should be careful because no one dares to confront them. Ryan answers that he does not care, although he will try to act carefully, so she will not get involved. Then he takes the biker and ties him to the hood of his own vehicle. When Rex regains consciousness, he tries to twist the events at the motel, saying that Darcy was the one who provoked the problem and that he only reacted to her provocations. Ryan, however, makes it clear that this is not the reason why he is torturing him. With fear reflected on his face, the biker ends up confessing the abuses he committed before going to prison. Desperate, he promises that if his life is spared, he will speak with his brother, so he can forget the incident with the prospect. Ryan does not respond to his pleas and simply places a cloth in his mouth. After this, Ryan starts the engine of the vehicle and accelerates directly toward the methamphetamine laboratory. The car crashes into the facility, and because of the large amount of flammable substances inside, the laboratory ends up exploding into a massive ball of fire. In another place, Drake wakes up startled. As if he had sensed that something terrible has happened, a few minutes later he receives a call from the gang asking him to meet with them immediately. When he leaves the club, the prospect tells him that they have bad news about his brother. Then they take him to the laboratory, where only flames remain, consuming what little is left of the building. Everything has been reduced to rubble and ashes, and among the remains, his brother's body has been completely burned. At that moment, the sheriff appears and approaches to speak with Drake. He tries to convince him not to take revenge against innocent people. However, the gang leader coldly responds that the town belongs to him, and therefore he can do whatever he wants. When returning to his son, the boy asks if he plans to do something about it. The sheriff answers that he must not get involved. His son insists and says that they cannot allow a gang to control the town. Annoyed, his father orders him to be quiet and explains that every decision he has made was to protect his family and also the town's residents. To say goodbye to his brother, Drake gathers his gang and orders them to fire their weapons into the sky as a tribute. On the other hand, Ryan goes to a church to confess his sins. While the priest speaks with him, his mind begins to fill with memories of his past life together with his wife, Mary, and his young son, Matt. In his memory, a happy scene appears. The three of them are at a family party enjoying time together. However, the memory abruptly changes when several masked men burst into the place. The joyful atmosphere disappears in an instant and gives way to the beginning of the tragedy that would mark his life forever. When he returns to the motel, Darcy asks about the biker's whereabouts. Ryan tells her that he had an accident at the laboratory. He lit a cigarette and caused a huge explosion in which he ended up being consumed by the flames. After hearing this, Darcy advises him to leave the town, because sooner or later the gang will discover what happened. She explains that Drake is practically the owner of the place. He knows everything that happens in every alley of the town. The biker gang was one of the founders of the place, and since then it has exercised enormous control over the area. According to her, Drake is the worst of those who have led the gang. He murdered the previous president of the club and took control of the leadership. Besides that, almost all the police officers are bought. Even the sheriff is one of his partners, which is why the citizens prefer to stay silent when they witness any illegality, because it is the only way to avoid trouble and live in peace. Ryan asks her why she continues living in the town. Darcy replies that in the past her husband tried to escape. One day he left for work and never returned, and for her it is obvious that the gang killed him. After telling him this, Darcy insists that she does not want problems with anyone and tells him that he should leave immediately, because if he stays, many innocent people could end up paying the consequences. However, shortly after, she regrets her own words and clarifies that if he wishes, he can stay at the motel until the days he paid in advance are completed. The next morning, the agents discover the murder of the biker. From the way his body was found, everything indicates that the vigilante was responsible. Besides, they know that he is the brother of the leader of a biker gang, a criminal who appears among the most wanted by the anti-drug unit. For the police, this can only mean one thing. The vigilante must be operating inside the town. However, leaving the place will not be easy, because the biker gang controls practically everything that happens in the area. After leaving his vehicle with the gas station attendant, who also works as a mechanic, the man begins to check the interior of the vehicle. In reality, he does it because the gang threatened him so that he could obtain information about the stranger. The mechanic at first refused to cooperate. However, Drake intimidated him by making a wound in his hand. Before killing Ryan, the gang wants to know exactly who he is. Whether he is an undercover federal agent or someone connected to the authorities, they prefer to make sure before making a move, because if they eliminate him without identifying him, they could have problems with the federals. Just when Kirby finds in the glove compartment the notes with information about several criminals who have already been killed, Ryan suddenly appears and tells him that he thought he was going to check the engine, not the inside of his vehicle. Visibly nervous, Kirby tries to play it off and invites him to his house to drink a beer. Taking advantage of the situation, the stranger asks him about the gang. He tells him that they traffic drugs and firearms, they hook people with their substances, and when they are in debt with a circle, they end up torturing them to death. The boat is like Drake's second office, and they traffic the merchandise both by water and by land. The circle has contacts all over the country. The police officers they cannot bribe end up being killed. They use the town as their headquarters, and the boat is like hell. After this, Ryan asks him about what he was looking for in his vehicle, and the mechanic confesses that he was threatened. He does not want problems with anyone, but he is forced to give them information. At that moment, a gang member, known as the Crab, appears. Kirby warns Ryan to be careful because he is one of Drake's bodyguards. Without giving it much importance, the stranger decides to go out and confront him. Without thinking twice, the biker tries to surprise him with a left hook. However, Ryan blocks the attack and immediately responds with 2 strong blows that knock him to the ground. Filled with rage, the thug gets up and tries to throw a series of quick punches, but he cannot even touch him. After dominating him with total superiority, Ryan orders him to leave. Humiliated, the biker gets on his motorcycle, and before leaving, he shouts that later he will take revenge for what happened, this time with the support of all his men. On the other hand, we see the gang leader meeting with the sheriff in a bar. During the conversation, Drake tells him that one of his men was attacked while transporting the merchandise. Someone knocked him unconscious and then burned the truck together with the entire cargo. The sheriff replies that the police have no information about that attack. However, he reveals something he has just discovered. The stranger is actually a decorated former police officer who disappeared from the map a long time ago, and maybe he could be involved in everything that has happened in these last days. When he arrives at the port that Kirby had indicated, Ryan carefully observes the movements in the area. Then he opens the trunk of his vehicle and several long-range weapons are revealed, with enough ammunition to face an entire gang. At that moment, memories from the past invade his mind again. Those masked men who burst into the party pulled out their weapons and began shooting, without showing the slightest mercy. Unexpectedly, the sheriff's son appears and surprises him. When he sees all the weapons, he advises him to wait a few minutes. He explains that Drake has already been alerted about a possible threat and that his men are prepared for an attack. If they act now, they could end up killing them all. The young agent asks him to give him some time. He plans to call some trustworthy colleagues to support the operation. He is tired of the gang's crimes and assures that, like many others, he would do whatever is necessary to put an end to the violence that has consumed the town of Hope. When returning to the motel, Ryan remembers that Darcy had invited him to dinner. But because he had been investigating the gang, he completely forgot about the conversation they had. Fortunately, Darcy tells him that it is not a problem and that they can postpone the dinner for another day. While they talk, Ryan observes some photographs where Darcy appears with her late husband. She then asks him if he has a family. Ryan pours himself some wine and answers that he had one, but they were murdered. He confesses that he should have died that afternoon as well. He explains that everything happened during a war for territory between motorcycle clubs, a conflict that his department helped to deactivate. Darcy asks if those responsible were members of the Circle, but Ryan clarifies that they were not. The men they managed to capture belonged to a small local club, and finally, he reveals the real reason why he came to the town. He came to kill Rex Salgado. Meanwhile, Kirby is intercepted by the gang. Drake tells him that one of his men saw him talking with a stranger and that he made a serious mistake by choosing the wrong side. Kirby tries to justify himself by saying that he is investigating him, but that he needs more time to obtain information. Drake replies that he should not lie to him. He begins to tell part of his past. His first conviction was for conspiracy to distribute when he was only 22 years old. On his first night in prison, he had to face what the inmates called a covered ceremony. 6 prisoners surrounded him and beat him brutally. Some of them even used knives. However, a few months later, he managed to take revenge on each of them. He earned the respect of the inmates, and when he finally left prison, he investigated the police officers who had arrested him and took revenge by murdering their families. He explains that this is what he does to anyone who tries to ruin his business. The next morning, the sheriff's son receives an alert with the location of Kirby's house. When he arrives at the place, he finds a shocking scene. The mechanic's body is hanging from his own crane. That same afternoon, the federal agent Frank arrives in the town. He tries to pressure the sheriff to obtain information, but the man refuses to cooperate and claims that Rex's death was simply an accident. The federal agent makes it clear that he knows it was not an accident. He also points out that the recent death of the mechanic seems to be retaliation for what happened to one of the members of the Circle. He warns him that if he refuses to cooperate, many innocent people could be affected. Even so, out of fear of the gang, the sheriff stands firm in his version. For him, everything was an accident, and there is nothing to investigate. Later, we see our protagonist breaking into one of the gang's clubs and surprising several of its members. When they see him, the crab orders his companions to attack him. However, the former police officer manages to defend himself by using the objects in the place to his advantage. While fighting several bikers at the same time, he uses the environment to neutralize them one by one, taking advantage of the fact that Ryan is distracted fighting the others. The crab pulls out a gun from one of his hiding places and tries to shoot him in the back. Luckily, the stranger realizes in time and uses the body of one of the bikers as a human shield. Then he disarms the crab and knocks him unconscious in a matter of seconds. Afterward, he throws him into the trunk of his vehicle and prepares for his next move, which consists of burning the biker's body and leaving it in front of the gang's club as a direct message to Drake. When he discovers what happened, Drake screams with rage at the prospect to mobilize all the gang's men. They must find the stranger and kill him no matter the cost. After eliminating the biker, Ryan is once again invaded by memories of his past. His mind returns to that afternoon at the party. His wife had realized that he was armed and a brief argument broke out between them. However, the moment was interrupted by their son, who was playing with a toy gun. Shortly after, while Ryan was drinking a beer, he noticed something strange. Several masked men were entering through the back of the place. By then, it was already too late. Ryan tried to react and pull out his weapon to defend himself, but he received several gunshots that left him unconscious. The attackers, who were armed bikers, began shooting mercilessly at everyone present at the party. The bullets ended the lives of his wife, his son, and many other people who were there. Because the first impacts left him unconscious, Ryan ended up surviving the attack. Later, during the funeral of his family, he made a promise to take revenge on all those responsible for their deaths. With time, he would discover that the men who participated in the attack were nothing more than simple henchmen who acted under the orders of superiors within the organization. After obtaining the location of the killers, he grabbed a shotgun and eliminated them in a matter of seconds, without giving them the chance to even say a word. That same night, Drake gathers his men. He arms them with their weapons and orders them to go out and search for the target. When he notices the presence of the bikers approaching the motel, Ryan runs to warn Darcy and asks her to stay away from the windows. When the gang members enter the place, Darcy turns off the lights, following the stranger's instructions. Taking advantage of the darkness and the environment, the former police officer begins moving, quickly eliminating several enemies in a matter of seconds. However, when they try to escape through the back door, both are surprised by the rest of the gang. Outnumbered, Ryan ends up being beaten until he loses consciousness. Before completely blacking out, he manages to see how the thugs take Darcy away by force. The next morning, Frank, accompanied by the sheriff's son, arrives at the motel. When they enter, they find the bodies of several bikers lying on the ground, clear evidence that a violent confrontation took place. Without wasting time, Frank takes his phone and contacts his unit, ordering them to head immediately to his location. When he regains consciousness, Ryan realizes that he is on the boat Kirby had told him about. The bikers have also taken Darcy there. Drake orders the prospect to do whatever he wants with her, but that first he must take his revenge against the stranger. Before leaving, Drake tells Ryan that he can see in his eyes the suffering of someone who has lost a loved one. When he is left alone with him, the prospect tries to punch him in the jaw, but he ends up hurting his own hand. Even so, he pretends it did not hurt and throws another punch into his stomach. Then he sits in front of him and comments with some surprise that his chin seems to be made of iron. He admits that he is a strong man, but assures that he is not strong enough to resist his knife. He adds that if he could decide, he would cut him into pieces to feed them to the pigs. Before leaving, he says that he will first have fun with Darcy and then return to torture him until he leaves him on the brink of death. However, he wants to leave him a small mark on his face. Just when he is about to cut his face, the vigilante manages to free himself and knocks him unconscious with a single punch. Afterward, he kills him using his own knife. Then he goes to search for Darcy. On the way, he encounters several bikers who try to stop him, but even though they outnumber him, none of them manage to seriously injure him. On the other hand, Danny arrives at his father's house and finds him dead, with his pistol still in his hand. Everything indicates that, cornered by the situation, he decided to end his own life. After learning what happened, Frank approaches Danny to offer his condolences. Then he asks him to keep a cool head and stay focused, warning him that now more than ever he must avoid making mistakes. After freeing Darcy, both of them move through the boat searching for a way out. While moving through the place, they reach the gang's warehouse. At that moment, Drake appears and reveals to Ryan that he was one of the main people involved in the murder of his family. He tells him that afternoon, after riddling them with bullets, he approached his body and removed his mask, thinking that he was already dead. When he saw him in the town, he did not recognize him at first, but after hearing that he was a former police officer whose family had been murdered, his face seemed familiar. Upon hearing this, Ryan pushes a table and prepares to fight. He throws the first punch, but the biker manages to push him away. Once on the ground, Drake tries to strangle him with a chokehold, but the vigilante manages to break free. Drake dodges several attacks and lands a few blows. For a moment, he seems to have the advantage, but his luck does not last long. Ryan knocks him down, and when he sees himself cornered, Drake grabs a tool and tries to attack him. The vigilante dodges the blows and finally manages to disarm him. Determined to satisfy his thirst for revenge, Ryan ties his arm to the biker's arm and they begin punching each other in the face with all their strength. Finally, the biker falls to the ground and the vigilante breaks the tape that kept them tied together. Darcy comes out of her hiding place and Ryan turns his back on the biker. Unexpectedly, Drake stands up and tries to attack him again with a sickle, but just at that moment the agents burst into the place and shoot him down. While the police begin investigating what happened on the boat, Ryan tries to leave. However, Frank stops him by pointing his gun at him. The vigilante asks if he plans to arrest him. The federal agent replies that he does, but not at that moment, because he does not have enough evidence to incriminate him. He tells him that the people of the town seem to be grateful to him. After reviewing his record, he discovered that he was a great police officer. Now he dedicates himself to eliminating the scum of society, but he warns him that he must be more careful because an innocent person could end up paying the consequences of his actions. An innocent person like Darcy. Before leaving the town, Ryan says goodbye to Darcy. She asks him to stay in contact. They hug, and she says goodbye, asking him to take care of himself. With Frank driving away in his vehicle, the story finally comes to an end.